The year I was 16, just after the social worker's car disappeared, my stepmother turned, her smile vanishing. "We're a team," she whispered, her voice a cold promise. 12 years later, she's my boss at Grayline and Cole, still preaching that same motto. Today, the board will see how her team really operates. Through every data point and hidden recording, I don't fight with fists. I fight with process, legality, and the cold, white light of a boardroom. My name is Reese Calloway. Today, I am 28 years old, and my world is one of data streams, risk matrices, and the quiet, humming certainty of a server farm. But memory is its own kind of data, and the most persistent file, the one that runs in the background of every analysis I perform, was logged 12 years ago in a small, peeling house in Coldridge, West Delmont. The air in that house always carried a specific scent on days like that, the day Child Protective Services came to visit. It was the smell of frantic preparation, a chemical ghost of lemon polish and bleach designed to scrub away any trace of our real lives. Maura, my stepmother, called it getting guest ready. I called it sanitizing the evidence. The white paint on the clapboard siding was flaking, curling away from the wood like sunburnt skin, a detail I hoped the social worker would notice. She didn't. She was focused on the plate of warm oatmeal raisin cookies Maura offered her, the steam still rising in the cool afternoon air. I remember the weight of the silence in the room, a heavy blanket punctuated only by Maura's warm, practiced laughter. "We're a team here," Maura said, her hand resting on my shoulder. The pressure was just a little too firm, a silent reminder of my role in the performance. She gestured to a brightly colored chore chart on the refrigerator, my name listed next to perfectly symmetrical check marks. Reese is a huge help. We all have our part to play. It's about family, about supporting each other. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, smiled. She saw a tidy home, a caring stepmother, and a quiet, perhaps slightly shy, 16-year-old. She saw the chart, the cookies, the carefully rehearsed harmony. She saw exactly what she was meant to see. My own observations were different. I noted the slight tremor in my hand as I accepted a cookie I didn't want. I cataloged the way Maura's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, a micro-expression of immense effort. I tracked the seconds on the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a countdown to the moment the performance would end. The visit concluded on the porch. The script was perfect. Polite handshakes, promises to check in, more warm smiles. I watched Mrs. Gable's sensible sedan pull away from the curb, its taillights shrinking until they were 2 red pinpricks swallowed by the dusk. The moment the car turned the corner, the entire atmosphere on the porch shifted. The air grew 10 degrees colder. Maura didn't move. She just stood there, her back to me, for a long, silent moment. Then, she turned. The welcoming hostess was gone, replaced by the project manager whose metrics were not being met. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper, a low frequency that vibrated through the floorboards. "We're a team," she repeated, the words now stripped of all warmth. They were no longer a comfort, they were a contract, a threat. She didn't need to raise her voice. The silence that followed was louder. Her eyes scanned the living room, a hawk searching for the slightest imperfection. They landed on a small ring of condensation on the polished hardwood floor, left by Mrs. Gable's glass of water. "You see that?" Maura asked, her voice dangerously calm. "That's a flaw in the presentation. It makes the whole house look sloppy. It makes us look sloppy." She didn't command me to clean it. She simply looked at the spot, then looked at me, an unspoken directive hanging in the air. The expectation was absolute. I was to anticipate the need, to erase the flaw before it was even named. This wasn't about a water spot. It was a test of my compliance. a reminder of the standard of perfection she demanded to maintain her public image. A team player, in her world, was someone who flawlessly executed her vision without needing to be told. The unspoken consequence of failure was the withdrawal of her conditional approval, a chilling silence that could last for days. In that house, I learned to survive by analyzing data streams invisible to anyone else. The floorboards in the hallway had their own language. A slow, measured creak meant she was content, probably reviewing bank statements at the kitchen table. A series of quick, sharp reports signaled an impending audit of my chores, my homework, my very existence. The sound of her car keys hitting the granite countertop was a key performance indicator. A soft clink meant a good day. A sharp clatter was a storm warning. This became my first risk management system, a predictive model built from acoustics and atmosphere. I learned to forecast her moods with the same precision I now use to predict shipping delays and inventory shortfalls. The skill set was transferable. My father, Grant, was a phantom in this equation. He was a long-haul trucker for a mid-sized freight company called Grayline and Coal, the same company where Maura now sits 2 levels above me. His presence was a crackling voice on the phone from a truck stop in Arizona or a motel in Nebraska. He was never there to see the data for himself. He only received Maura's executive summaries. "She's just trying to run a tight ship, Reese," he'd say, his voice weary from the road. "Your stepmom, she's trying her best. It's hard for her too. Just try to be a team." He heard her words, her curated reports of a difficult teenager and a stepmother doing her saintly duty. He never heard the silences. He never felt the pressure differential in the air when a door closed. He trusted the system Maura had built, never thinking to audit the raw data. He believed in the team because he was never on the field to see how the game was really played. So I started my own log, in the back of my closet, on the dusty top of a forgotten dresser. I kept a record. With my fingertip, I'd trace the date, the time, and the infraction. October 14, 4:52 p.m. Water ring. A flaw in the presentation. Nova 3, 8:17 p.m. Dishes loaded inefficiently. Not thinking of the team. It was an invisible ledger. A database written in dust that would be wiped away by the next cleaning cycle. But the act of recording it etched the information into my own memory. It was my first data set, my private blockchain of grievances. It was proof, even if only for me, that this was real. The community of Coldridge was a closed system, built on polite nods and the unspoken agreement not to look too closely. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable's sister-in-law, in fact, must have heard the occasional sharp word, the tense, clipped arguments that were always followed by Maura's overly bright laughter. But on Sunday mornings at the Coldridge Community Church, Maura was a portrait of grace, smiling warmly, organizing bake sales, her hand always resting gently on my back as we walked in. Who would question a woman who baked the best lemon meringue pie for the church picnic? Who would look past the perfect facade when it was so much more pleasant than the potential truth? No one ever asked a second question. The performance was too convincing. Lying there in my bed at night, listening to the house settle, I would stare into the darkness and make a promise to that quiet, 16-year-old analyst. One day, the evidence wouldn't be written in dust. It would be clear, indelible, and quantifiable. It would be presented in a format no one could ignore or explain away with a warm smile and a plate of cookies. One day, the world would see her data, not just her performance, and I would be the one to present the report. My escape from Coldridge was quiet and procedural. It came in the form of a scholarship for information systems at Slatebridge University, a clean, logical exit strategy. While my peers were navigating campus social structures, I was spending my nights and weekends in the cavernous, echoing expanse of a third-party logistics warehouse on the industrial outskirts of the city. I wasn't just earning tuition money, I was conducting fieldwork. There, the supply chain wasn't an abstract concept on a flowchart. It was the smell of diesel fumes and cardboard, the hydraulic sigh of a pallet jack, the precise weight of a scanner in my hand, and the relentless rhythm of trucks arriving and departing. I learned the system from the ground up, understanding that every box, every pallet, every bill of lading was a data point with a physical reality. A misplaced digit on a screen in an office meant a 50-pound box sitting in the wrong aisle, a tangible error. It was a lesson in the unforgiving integrity of physical things, a world away from Mora's curated illusions. During those years, my father made a significant career move. Or rather, Mora engineered one for him. Shortly after they married, a position for a regional finance manager opened up at Grayline & Cole. With Mora's expert coaching and resume polishing, Grant, a man who understood highways better than spreadsheets, was suddenly in a corner office. It was, she announced on a stilted family phone call, a testament to what a family could achieve when they worked together. She had ascended from being a trucker's wife to a power player's spouse, embedding herself into the corporate structure that had long been the backdrop of our lives. When I graduated, summa cum laude, the next phase of her strategic plan was unveiled. It was an offer, presented as an act of familial grace. "Reese, darling," she'd said over a sterile lunch at a restaurant with white tablecloths, "there's an opening for an operations analyst at the Harbor Point Depot. It's a wonderful starting opportunity, and you'd report to me. We can finally be the family team I've always dreamed of." She was integrating her assets, bringing me under her direct control. To my father, it was a beautiful gesture. To me, it was an invitation to sit at the heart of the system I intended to dismantle. I accepted with a polite, professional smile. An analyst needs access to the source code. She was handing it to me. My cubicle at the Harbor Point office was standard issue corporate gray. On my second day, Mora arrived with a rolled-up poster. With a flourish, she tacked it to the fabric wall directly in my line of sight. In cheerful, looping font, it read, "Teamwork makes the dream work." She stood back to admire it, her hand on her hip. "Just a little something to inspire us," she said, her smile as bright and synthetic as the laminate on my desk. "It's how we'll get things done here, together." Her definition of teamwork became clear at the end of my first quarter. A discrepancy in a fuel surcharge report had caught my eye. The numbers were technically within acceptable variance, but the pattern was illogical. I flagged it, requesting the raw telemetry data from the trucking fleet. My request was denied. The next day, Mora called me into her glass-walled office. "Reese," she began, her tone one of disappointed mentorship. "Part of being on a team is knowing which battles to fight, trusting the process. Sometimes, for the sake of efficiency, we have to accept the top-line numbers. Pushing back on every little thing shows a lack of flexibility." That quarter, my performance review was glowing, with one exception. Under the section for collaborative spirit, she had noted my tendency toward rigid process adherence. My performance bonus was cut by 15%. The message was clear. Compliance was valued over accuracy. I signed the review without comment and went back to my desk. The poster seemed to mock me, her dream, her work. My role was simply to facilitate it. It was 2 months later that I found the first real thread. Container Lot 7B13, a shipment of high-end electronics from Singapore. The file was flagged for a minor overage, nothing that would trigger an automatic audit. As I reconciled the associated costs, I saw it. A demurrage fee, a charge for failing to load or unload a ship within the agreed-upon time, for $3,800. Standard procedure. But scrolling further down the invoice, I saw a second charge, listed under ancillary port fees, for the exact same amount. Both were approved and signed off by a third-party logistics contractor I'd never heard of. Everline Services. My heart rate remained steady. This was not a moment for emotion. It was a moment for process. I minimized the invoice and opened a new query. A corporate registration search for Everline Services took less than a minute. The company was registered in West Delmont 6 months after Maura's promotion to Director of Regional Operations. The address listed was not an office building or a warehouse. It was a P.O. box at a strip mall in a town 30 miles from Coldridge, the same strip mall that housed the law office that had handled her divorce from her first husband. Next, I cross-referenced the supplier for Lot 7B13, a major electronics distributor. A quick search of their executive team brought up the name of their chief financial officer. His professional bio mentioned his passion for sailing. His social media, which was carelessly public, featured dozens of photos of him on a sailboat named the Maura. He and my stepmother, it turned out, shared a deep and abiding passion for weekend regattas and, it seemed, for creative invoicing. Everline Services was a ghost. A shell company created for the sole purpose of billing gray line and coal for services never rendered, or, as in this case, for services already paid for. A simple, elegant fraud. Maura would approve the invoice from the supplier, and her lover, the CFO, would approve the phantom invoice from Everline. The money would flow into an account controlled by the two of them, a rounding error in a multi-billion-dollar logistics operation. It was brilliant in its banality. No one looks for a complex conspiracy in a demurrage fee. That evening, I did not go home. I stayed late. The office quiet except for the hum of the servers and the distant roar of a departing cargo plane. I opened a new spreadsheet on a password-protected, encrypted drive. I kept it clean. Minimalist. Column A, Lot ID. Column B, Invoice Number. Column C, Discrepancy Type. Column D, Contractor Name. Column E, Approving Manager. I entered the data for 7B13. It was the first entry in what I knew would become a comprehensive catalog of her greed. A cold, impartial matrix of fact. There was a grim satisfaction in it, like tracing a date in the dust of a closet. Only this time, the record would not be so easily erased. In the bottom drawer of my desk, locked in a small metal cash box, lay an old, disconnected smartphone. It was a relic from my university days. Its only function now was a simple, one-touch voice recording application. It was a habit I'd developed in the house in Coldridge, a desperate, silent need to have a record, to capture the nuance and tone that a written log could never convey. I never used it to record conversations illegally. Its purpose was different. After a particularly tense meeting or an unnerving comment, I would go to my car and dictate my own debrief, a private audio log of the event, the exact phrasing, the tone of voice, the unspoken implications. It was a discipline of memory, ensuring the data remained uncorrupted by time or emotion. The habit of a survivor had seamlessly transformed into the tool of an analyst. That night, I took it out, turned it on, and in the quiet dark of the parking garage, I spoke a single sentence. Everline Services. The project begins now. The investigation began not with a bang, but with a pattern. In the world of data, a pattern is everything. It's a whisper that, if you listen closely enough, becomes a confession. I started plotting the Everline Services invoices against a corporate calendar. An anomaly soon emerged, clear and stark against the background noise of legitimate transactions. The fraudulent invoices weren't random. They clustered. They appeared in the system on the Friday before a 3-day weekend, when half the department was mentally already on the road. They were processed in the frantic week between Christmas and New Year's, a black hole of skeleton crews and out-of-office replies. Most tellingly, they were consistently approved on the single day per quarter that our external auditors were on site. A brilliant piece of misdirection. While the watchdogs were busy in the conference rooms on the 12th floor, Maura was quietly approving ghost fees in the operational budget on the 4th. It was a strategy of exploiting distraction, a tactic I recognized. These were the corporate equivalents of my father's long-haul trips, windows of opportunity when the primary witness was guaranteed to be absent. Seeing the pattern was one thing. Proving who was executing it was another. I needed a direct link. I needed Maura's digital fingerprint on the weapon itself. So I designed a trap, a simple, elegant piece of code I called a canary. In her world of carefully managed appearances, an imperfection, even a tiny one, was intolerable. She couldn't leave a water ring on the floor. I gambled she couldn't leave a statistical anomaly in a report bearing her department's name. The bait was a weekly fuel cost projection report that went to all regional directors. Before submitting it, I embedded my canary, a single, calculated error of 0.03% in the aggregate fuel efficiency calculation. It was small enough to be a typo, a rounding error that 99% of managers would overlook. But it was an imperfection. And I knew Maura reviewed these reports with an obsessive's eye for detail before they were rolled up into the national summary. I submitted the report to the shared server at 4:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. Then, I opened a separate, discrete window on my monitor, running a script that would alert me the moment the file was accessed and modified. I waited. The trap was set. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The office emptied out, the light outside fading from gray to black. At 6:28 p.m., my screen flashed a silent alert. The file had been opened. A second alert followed 90 seconds later. The file had been saved. I ran a comparison. The 0.03% deviation had been corrected. The number was now perfect, rounded to the precise decimal point dictated by internal accounting protocol. The canary was dead. The system log was my witness. It provided a story in 3 cold, hard lines of text. Timestamp, 18/28/41. ST, user ID, mvale. IP address, 10.1.12.15. Not her office computer. Not her laptop connected to the corporate VPN. The IP address was hardwired to the primary Ethernet port in the Summit. The glass-walled executive conference room on the 12th floor. The room was soundproofed, with a panoramic view of the harbor, a place for confidential meetings and high-level strategy, a place where a director could work after hours, confident that no one would walk by and see her screen. She had taken the bait. I felt no surge of victory, just the quiet, grim satisfaction of a successful test. My hypothesis was confirmed. With this confirmation, her other activities came into sharper focus. I searched the internal email archives. 6 months ago, Maura had launched what she called a cost optimization and synergy initiative. It was a masterpiece of corporate jargon, all about streamlining vendor relationships and empowering third-party partners to achieve greater fiscal efficiency. Her emails on the subject were relentlessly cheerful, filled with exclamation points and praise for her team's commitment to the bottom line. But when I cross-referenced the dates of her initiative's key milestones with the Everline invoices, the 2 timelines synced perfectly. Her campaign wasn't about saving the company money. It was about creating the narrative framework to justify the payments to Everline services. It was a smokescreen of buzzwords. The time had come to exfiltrate the data. Keeping it on the company network, even on a hidden partition, was an unacceptable risk. That night, I initiated a series of low and slow data transfers, pulling everything I had onto an encrypted, air-gapped solid-state drive. Server logs, the archived emails, the full invoice history for Everline, the corporate registration documents, the CFO's social media feed, and the before and after versions of my Canary report. I disconnected the drive. The evidence was now offline. It was mine. I created a single folder on the drive. I named it Teams Real. Inside, I didn't use clinical, descriptive file names. That felt too detached, too impersonal. This was not an abstract case study. This was a reckoning. I began to organize the evidence, and as I did, I named each file after one of Maura's signature phrases, the words she had used to build her world and police mine. The initial Everline invoice and its duplicate charge became a PDF named We're a Team, PDF. The master spreadsheet, my cold matrix of her theft, logging every fraudulent transaction, I named Family First, XLSX. The email chain where she enthusiastically launched her cost optimization campaign was saved as Do It for the Brand, EML. And the server log, the undeniable proof that she herself had logged in from the 12th floor fortress to personally correct my 0.03% error, I saved as Trust the Process, log. Each click of the save button was a small, quiet act of redefinition, turning her weapons of manipulation into articles of evidence. As I stared at the file names on my screen, another grid superimposed itself in my mind's eye. The bright, colorful chore chart on the refrigerator in Coldridge. The perfect check marks. The gold stars for a flawlessly executed week. That chart was a document of public presentation, a performance metric designed to prove what a good, cooperative team we were. It was a spreadsheet for managing a child's compliance, its primary function to generate a clean report for any outside observer. It was a list of rules designed to keep the truth hidden. The Excel grid on my laptop was its direct descendant and its mortal enemy. It was a document of raw, unvarnished truth. It was a matrix for tracking a manager's malfeasance, its primary function to generate a report that would shatter the public image. It was a list of her rules being broken. One chart was built for my survival. This one was built for her downfall. And in that moment, staring at the folder named Teams Real, I understood something fundamental about Maura Vale. Her greatest strength, and therefore her greatest vulnerability, was her addiction to the stage. She had defeated the CPS investigation not with facts, but with a flawless performance. She had built her career at Grayline & Cole on the same principle: managing perception. She didn't just need to win, she needed to be seen winning. Sending this drive to the board of directors or the SEC would be effective, but it wouldn't be justice. It would happen behind closed doors. She would craft a narrative of misunderstanding, of rogue employees, of being a victim herself. She would control the story. No, to truly dismantle her. I couldn't just expose the crime. I had to expose the performer. The evidence wasn't enough. I needed a stage, a live audience, and a camera. I had to create a situation where she would, by her own volition, step into a spotlight of her own making. I wouldn't just present the evidence. I would build a stage, hand her a microphone, and let her own favorite slogans become the charges read against her. The project, codenamed Whose Team, moved from the planning phase into execution. Like any complex logistics operation, success depended on meticulous sequencing and the flawless integration of disparate components. My proposal to the corporate communications department was a model of proactive, team-oriented thinking. I framed it as a morale-boosting initiative, a response to the quiet disengagement that follows any major corporate restructuring. The memo was titled, Project Uplift, a proposal for a live Team Culture Day showcase. It was a document of pure, distilled corporate speak. I wrote of leveraging our internal success stories, creating synergistic brand narratives, and providing a transparent, data-driven look at the operational excellence that defines the Grayline & Cole family. I suggested a live-streamed event, originating from headquarters, that would celebrate the collaborative spirit of our most efficient depot, Harbor Point. It would be an opportunity, I wrote, for leadership to connect directly with the operational core of the company. It was a value proposition no communications team could resist. They approved it in principle within a day, but I knew the final sign-off, the one that mattered, had to come from the director of regional operations herself. My proposal was forwarded to Maura. Her reply came in less than an hour. An email copied to the VP of Communications and the head of HR. An absolutely outstanding initiative. Reese, this is exactly the kind of forward thinking I love to see from my team. It's vital that the entire company, right up to the board, understands the commitment and synergy that drive our success. Let's make this happen. Let everyone see what a team we are. Her ego was the primary stakeholder, and I had secured its enthusiastic buy-in. She saw a stage. I was building a courtroom. The venue was critical. I requisitioned the largest glass-walled conference room in Greybridge Plaza, our national headquarters, citing the need for a space that felt open and transparent. Working with the IT department, I specified the technical requirements. The centerpiece would be a massive, wall-mounted display, which I requested be configured to show a live feed of Harbor Point's key performance indicators, on-time departures, load efficiency, turnaround times. The data stream was real, pulled directly from our logistics software. It would serve as the dynamic, impressive backdrop for the event, the official story. The presentation itself was a simple PowerPoint deck. I built it myself, a clean corporate template of blues and grays. There were slides with mission statements, photos of smiling employees in hard hats, and rolling testimonials. And then there was the final slide, which appeared to be a simple, blank holding screen with the Greyline & Cole logo. It wasn't. Embedded in that slide was a macro, a small, dormant piece of code. It was designed to do one thing. Upon receiving a specific audio trigger from the room's microphone system, it would execute a pivot command. The data source for the giant KPI screen would instantly switch from the live, public-facing server to a discrete USB port on the presentation laptop. The port, where my solid-state drive, Teams Real, would be waiting. The trigger phrase, programmed with a 99.9% confidence threshold, was Maura's favorite mantra. We're a team. Next, I needed to gather supporting human-centric data. I scheduled a meeting with the Director of Compliance, a stern, by-the-book man who had no love for Maura's corner-cutting management style. I presented him with a proposal for an anonymous departmental ethics and pressure survey. I framed it as a best practice tool to proactively identify potential compliance risks and areas of employee stress. It's about protecting the company, I argued, by creating a safe channel for feedback. He agreed. The survey was deployed digitally. The results were compiled into a corporate heat map. Most departments glowed a cool green or a cautionary yellow. Maura's division, encompassing Harbor Point and 2 other depots, was a furious, undeniable shade of red. The data showed statistically significant reports of pressure to modify reports, fear of reprisal for raising concerns, and a culture that prioritizes metrics over process. It was a portrait of a toxic command structure, and it was now an official company document. With the corporate evidence in place, I reached into the past. A search of the company's HR database gave me the name I was looking for. Sarah Jenkins. My old next-door neighbor in Coldridge, the woman whose own tired expression I sometimes caught as she retrieved her mail, her glance lingering on our house for just a moment too long after the sound of a raised voice or a tense, clipped exchange through an open window. She now worked in payroll at Greyline & Cole's main office. I sent her a casual internal message. Sarah, Reese Calloway here. We used to be neighbors back in Coldridge. Small world. I'm running a company culture event next month, and I thought it would be great to have some familiar faces in the audience. Wondering if you'd be free to attend? She replied almost immediately. A warm, slightly surprised message saying she'd be delighted. She wasn't a witness to a crime. She was a witness to a performance. Her presence in that room would be a living, breathing baseline against which Maura's long history of public fabrication could be measured. My personal risk mitigation strategy was next. I found a lawyer, a man who specialized in corporate whistleblowing cases, through a discreet referral. Our meeting took place in a sterile, anonymous coffee shop miles from the city center. I didn't give him my name. I presented a hypothetical situation. I outlined the data, the structure of the fraud, and the plan for its disclosure. He listened without expression, then laid out the legal framework, the state and federal protections, and the precise steps required to secure them. I paid him a retainer in cash. The following day, I sent a courier to his office. The package contained a duplicate of the team's real drive and a signed, notarized, non-disclosure agreement. He was now my legal escrow, my insurance policy. The final piece, the accelerant for the fire, was the audience. An internal broadcast was good. The presence of the board was better. But to make it inescapable, to burn away any possibility of Maura spinning this as an internal matter, I needed the public, not the mainstream news, which would sensationalize it, but a voice the industry respected and the board feared. I identified my target, a senior reporter for Logistics Ledger, the most influential trade publication in the supply chain industry. My email to him was concise and professional. I introduced myself as an operations analyst at Grayline & Cole. I told him we were hosting a groundbreaking Team Culture Day to showcase our innovative, data-driven approach to management and employee empowerment, led by our visionary director, Maura Vale. I offered him an exclusive. He could be the only member of the press in the room, with guaranteed access to our leadership team for a story on what the future of corporate culture in logistics looked like. It was an irresistible pitch, a positive, forward-looking story handed to him on a silver platter. He responded within the hour, confirming his attendance. The trap was now fully assembled. The stage was set, the cameras were invited, the evidence was loaded, and the star of the show had not only approved the production, but was eagerly rehearsing her lines. All that was left was to send out the invitations. The week before Team Culture Day was a study in procedural execution. The emotional component of my work was complete. What remained was the meticulous, dispassionate process of securing the operational theater. It was a pre-flight checklist, where every item ticked off was another potential point of failure eliminated. Item 1. Legal immunization. I drafted a formal whistleblower report pursuant to the West Delmont Corporate Accountability Act, Section 2A-4. The document was dry, factual, and devoid of personal narrative. It contained a high-level summary of the Everline Services scheme, referencing invoice numbers and transaction dates. I printed 2 copies. One was sealed in a standard business envelope. The other I took to the post office, along with the sealed copy, and sent it via certified mail with return receipt requested, addressed to the office of the State Attorney General. The stamped, dated receipt from the postal clerk became my proof of filing. The legal shield was in place. I was no longer a disgruntled employee. I was a protected state witness. Item 2. Data redundancy and integrity. A single point of data storage is a single point of failure. I implemented a tripartite backup protocol. Backup Alpha was the primary solid-state drive, Teams Real, which I would have with me. Backup Bravo was a hardware-encrypted USB flash drive, an exact clone of the first. I sealed it in an anti-static evidence bag, signed my name across the seal, and placed it in a safe deposit box at a downtown bank, the key to which was in a separate location. Backup Charlie, another identical clone, was already in the possession of my legal counsel, held in escrow as per our agreement. The data was now secure, distributed, and independently verifiable. An attack on one vector would not compromise the mission. Item 3. Strategic scheduling integration. As the project lead for Team Culture Day, I had a degree of influence over the scheduling of adjacent corporate events. The board of directors had a quarterly review meeting scheduled for the same day, citing a desire to leverage executive presence and create synergistic scheduling. I proposed a revised agenda to the chairman's executive assistant. My event would run from 10 o'clock a.m. to 11:30 a.m. The board meeting would commence at 1 o'clock p.m. I made one specific, small suggestion for the board's agenda. Given the focus on operational efficiency in the morning session, I wrote, it might be an opportune moment for the board to review and approve pending long-term contractor renewals to capitalize on the day's strategic momentum. I attached a list of pending renewals. At the top of the list was the 3-year, multi-million-dollar master service agreement for Everline Services. The assistant agreed it was an efficient use of time. The agenda was set. The trap was baited with the very prize Maura was seeking. Item 4. Trigger phrase confirmation. I required absolute certainty that Maura would speak the activation key. I sent her an email 3 days before the event with the subject line, Final Run of Show for Team Culture Day. The email contained a minute-by-minute schedule. It began, 10 o'clock a.m., opening remarks from Maura Vale, Director of Regional Operations. Note, we will begin the live stream with your signature opening. We're a team. To set a collaborative tone for the event, please confirm this is still the plan. Her response was prompt. Confirmed. Excellent detail. Reese, this is how a team gets things done. I saved the email as a PDF to the team's real drive. File name, Confirmation of Intent, PDF. She had now submitted her opening line in writing. Item 5. Technical Systems Verification. The day before the event, I scheduled a mandatory final AV check with 2 technicians from the IT department. We tested the microphones, the speakers, the live stream connection. Then, I asked them to test the alternate presentation input. There's a small video segment I might run from a USB drive, I explained, holding up my innocuous-looking personal flash drive, not Teams reel. I had them plug it into the specific USB port designated for the macro. They ran the diagnostic. The connection was flawless. The system recognized the external drive instantly. While they were focused on the main screen, I discreetly recorded their entire verification process on my personal phone. I now had a time-stamped video file proving the system was fully functional and that the USB-to-screen data pathway was operational 24 hours prior to the event, preempting any potential claim of a technical malfunction or sabotage. Item 6. Executive pre-briefing. I needed one powerful ally in the room who wouldn't be blindsided, someone who could steer the board's reaction from chaos to control. The chairman of the board, a formidable old-guard executive named Arthur Vance, had a well-known disdain for Maura's flashy, substance-free management style. I requested a 5-minute, unscheduled meeting with him under the pretext of a final query about the event. In his office, I kept it brief. Mr. Vance, I said, my voice level and calm. I wanted to give you a professional courtesy heads up. Tomorrow's presentation on team culture will include a brief, unexpected segment related to corporate compliance and vendor management. I believe the information will be of significant interest to the board. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. His eyes, sharp and analytical, narrowed slightly. He saw a junior analyst, calm and resolute, delivering a cryptic but serious message. He smelled risk, and he hated risk he didn't control. I'll be paying close attention, Ms. Calloway, he said. That was all I needed. Item 7. Archival Record Supplement. This was a personal item on the checklist, but legally necessary. I contacted the West Delmont Regional CPS office. I made an appointment, not to file a new complaint, but to provide an adult addendum to a historical family case file from 12 years prior. I stated that, as a minor, I had been unable to articulate the nature of the coercive and high-pressure domestic environment, and wished to add a formal statement to the record detailing the long-term patterns of psychological manipulation and deception I had experienced. This action served 2 purposes. First, It officially documented my side of the story in a government file, transforming it from a mere memory into a piece of administrative record. Second, it preemptively framed Maura's past behavior not as a simple domestic issue, but as a foundational data point in a long-standing pattern of creating and enforcing false narratives for personal gain, a pattern that had now migrated to her corporate life. Item 8. Personal Presentation Protocol. The morning of the event. I prepared my own uniform. A plain white button-down shirt, crisply ironed. Simple black trousers. Flat shoes. No jewelry. No watch. No makeup. My hair was pulled back in a neat, severe knot. My appearance was designed to be a blank slate, a non-entity. I was to be the presenter, not the presentation. When I stood up, I wanted them to see the data on the screen, not me. I wanted them to analyze the numbers, not my expression. I was not a victim seeking pity or a vigilante seeking applause. I was an analyst delivering a report, and the report was final. The room was cool and quiet, the air conditioned to a precise corporate standard. On the raised glass stage, Maura Vale was a portrait of executive poise. The soft, flattering light smoothed away any hint of imperfection, catching the subtle sheen of her silk blouse. Behind her, the massive screen glowed with the vibrant, reassuring pulse of real-time KPIs from Harbor Point, green arrows trending upward. Efficiency metrics hitting 98.7%. Customer satisfaction scores a perfect 5 stars. It was a beautiful fiction. She stood at the transparent lectern, hands resting lightly on its edges, and surveyed her audience. The board of directors in the front row, the VPs and department heads behind them, the live stream camera with its unblinking red light. The reporter from Logistics Ledger was seated to the side, his notebook already open. Maura radiated a calm, benevolent power. This was her element. This was her show. She leaned into the microphone, her voice warm and resonant, filling the silent room. She smiled, a perfect, practiced expression of sincerity aimed directly at the camera, at the hundreds of employees watching across the country. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "It's moments like these that truly define us, that show the world what we're capable of when we work together. Because at the end of the day, there's only one thing that matters. We're a team." The final word, team, hung in the air for a fraction of a second. In the back of the room, where I stood by the AV console, I felt the silent click of a lock disengaging. On the stage, the audio signal from Maura's microphone reached the presentation laptop. The macro, patient and dormant, recognized its trigger phrase. It executed its command. The transition on the giant screen was not a glitch. It was a smooth, deliberate pivot. The vibrant green KPIs did not vanish. They dissolved, replaced by a stark, black and white document, an invoice. The room's collective breath hitched. At the top, the Gray Line and Coal logo. In the center, a charge for $3,800 for demurrage fees, Lot 7B13, and further down, under ancillary port fees, another charge, $3,800, billed by a company named Everline Services. Before a confused murmur could begin, the image on the screen changed again. It was now a system log. A single highlighted line of text glowed against the dark background. Timestamp, 18/28/41. ST, user ID, M. Vale. IP address, 10.1/12/15. Conference room, The Summit. My Canary report. The screen split. On the right, the invoice. On the left, a new document. The corporate registration for Everline Services. The address listed was a P.O. Box, Box 17B. The camera operator, sensing the shift in the room, instinctively zoomed in on the details. On a smaller monitor to the side of the stage, previously showing the event's logo, a new feed appeared, It was Mora's own email chain, the one launching her cost optimization and synergy initiative. A second window opened beside it, showing a bank transfer statement from Everline Services to an offshore account. The account holder's name was redacted, but the transfer was co-signed by the CFO of the electronics distributor, whose name was on the Lot 7B13 manifest. The low hum of the building's climate control system suddenly sounded like a jet engine. The silence in the room was absolute, a physical pressure. No one coughed. No one shifted in their seat. The reporter from Logistics Ledger was no longer writing. He was filming the screen with his phone, his face a mask of intense, disbelieving concentration. The board members sat like stone figures, their eyes locked on the damning data. I pushed away from the console and walked toward the stage. My footsteps on the polished concrete floor were the only sound. I stopped at the bottom of the short steps, my voice clear and steady in the charged silence, amplified by the still active microphone system. When a team siphons money from the very goods it's paid to protect, I said, looking not at Mora but at the board, it ceases to be a team. It becomes a conspiracy. Mora, who had been frozen in a rictus of a smile, finally broke. Her eyes darted from the screen to me, a flicker of raw panic behind the carefully constructed facade. Arthur Vance, the chairman of the board, turned his head slowly, his gaze pinning me to the floor. His voice was like gravel. "Miss Calloway, do you have a chain of custody for this data?" "I do, sir," I replied. From my pocket, I produced the small, solid-state drive. It was sealed inside a clear evidence bag, my signature prominent across the tamper-proof tape. This is a forensically sound, read-only copy of all relevant files, logs, and communications. I invite the board to have it opened and verified by an independent third-party auditor. I will provide the password only to them. In the back row, I saw Sarah Jenkins, my old neighbor from Coldridge, bring a hand to her mouth. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the name M. Vale glowing on the screen. She was connecting a history of small, unheard cruelties to this moment of vast, undeniable corruption. Mora finally found her voice. She let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound utterly alien in the tense room. This is absurd," she stammered, gripping the lectern. "A technical glitch. Reese, you know how these systems can be? This is clearly a procedural oversight, a clerical error that's being maliciously taken out of context." She was defaulting to her script, trying to manage the narrative. But I had anticipated the final act. I gave a slight nod to the technician at the console. He pressed a single key. The screen behind Mora changed one last time. It was a high-resolution scan of a single document. The State of West Delmont application for business registration. The business name at the top, Everline Services, LLC. The camera zoomed slowly to the bottom of the page, to the signature line next to the title, Founding Member, Sole Proprietor. The signature was clear, a looping, confident script. It did not say Mora Vale. It said Mora Jessup, her maiden name. A gasp rippled through the room. It was irrefutable. It was personal. It was a ghost from a past she had meticulously buried, now projected 10 feet high for the entire corporate structure to see. The name linked the shell company not to an anonymous manager or a flawed process, but to her, the individual, before she had ever become a part of Greyline and Cole, before she had ever married my father. She stared at the signature, her own history weaponized against her. The blood drained from her face. The performer was gone. The stage, the lights, the audience. It had all vanished. She was exposed, standing alone under a sterile, unforgiving spotlight. The dream was over. The work was done. Arthur Vance did not take his eyes off Mora's frozen form for a long moment. He then turned his gaze, heavy with the weight of decades of corporate governance, Back to me. His voice cut through the silence. No longer a question, but a command. Ms. Calloway, you have made an extraordinary claim. Walk us through the evidence. Systematically. I gave a single, respectful nod. The technician, following my prearranged cue, switched the main screen to a clean, numbered list. This was no longer a performance. It was an audit. Exhibit A, I began, my voice flat, professional. The activating phrase itself, we're a team. This slogan was more than a motivational tool. It was a pattern identifier. An analysis of the past 18 months of internal communications reveals that this phrase was used by Director Vale in written approvals for over 90% of the invoices submitted by Everline Services. The frequency of its use, and the corresponding value of the invoices, shows a statistically significant spike in the final week of each fiscal quarter, immediately preceding the calculation of performance bonuses. The screen behind me populated with a line graph. One line, in blue, showed the use of the trigger phrase. The other, in red, showed the dollar amount of Everline invoices. The two lines moved in near-perfect, damning synchronicity. Exhibit B, I continued, as the screen changed to the Corporate Ethics Survey heat map. The results of the Anonymous Compliance Survey, authorized by the Director of Compliance. This is a visual representation of employee feedback regarding ethical pressure. As you can see, the majority of the company's divisions are green, indicating a healthy culture. A few are yellow, indicating moderate concern. I paused as the image zoomed in, the red color flooding the screen, stark and aggressive. Director Vale's entire division is deep red. Specific, anonymized comments from her subordinates cite a persistent pressure to adjust figures to meet targets, and a culture where process is secondary to presentation. The screen changed again. Exhibit C, a direct quote from Director Vale, taken from the officially recorded all-hands virtual meeting on May 12th of this year, a meeting held to address concerns about rising operational costs. Maura's voice, confident and reassuring, filled the room from the overhead speakers. It was a sterile audio file, stripped of all context but her words. I know the numbers look challenging, but we need to focus on the big picture. Remember what's important. Team first, margin second, will make the numbers work. As her voice faded, a document appeared on screen. An Everline invoice for an unprecedented $17,500, citing expedited service fees. The approval date was May 13th. The day after she told her team to put the team first and the margin second, the numbers had been made to work. Exhibit D, I said, my tone unchanging. Physical evidence. The screen now showed a split view of security footage from the Harbor Point warehouse, time-stamped 2 weeks prior. On the left, you see a pallet of high-value microchips from Lot C44 being designated as lost in transit due to a supposed clerical error. On the right, you see footage from 12 hours later. The same pallet, with its distinctive markings, reappears. It is being relabeled and integrated into a new shipment managed by a third-party contractor. A final zoom showed the new label being affixed. The contractor's logo was the stylized E of Everline Services. The pallet was not lost. It was laundered. I turned my head slightly, directing my next words to the reporter from Logistics Ledger. The total value of the lost pallet was greater than the declared quarterly profit for the entire depot. I let that statement hang in the air, then faced the board once more. The evidence I have compiled, including the full data set on the encrypted drive, was reviewed by external legal counsel specializing in corporate fraud. Counsel has confirmed that the evidence meets the legal threshold for immediate summary suspension of the involved employee and the filing of a formal report with the appropriate state and federal authorities. Arthur Vance absorbed this information without blinking. He looked down the long, polished table at his fellow board members. He didn't need to poll them. Their faces were grim masks of consensus. He looked at the corporate counsel, who gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The decision was made. Vance stood up, his height and bearing commanding the room's absolute attention. This board will now vote on 2 motions. Motion 1, to immediately suspend Maura Vale from all duties and responsibilities at Greyline & Cole, pending the outcome of a full forensic investigation, and to revoke all access to company property and systems, effective immediately. All in favor? A chorus of 8 distinct, firm voices said, "Aye." There were no nays. Motion 2, Vance continued, his voice like ice, to indefinitely freeze the pending master service agreement with the entity known as Everline Services, and to engage the firm of Deloitte to conduct a full, independent forensic audit of all transactions related to this vendor and its principals, with a mandate to cooperate fully with law enforcement. All in favor? Again, the unanimous, unhesitating reply, "Aye." "The motions carry," Vance declared. He then looked at a man near the door, the head of corporate security. "Please escort Ms. Vale from the premises." The entire process had taken less than 90 seconds. As the security chief began to walk toward the stage, I spoke one last time. My voice was quiet, but in the profound silence, it carried to every corner of the room. I looked directly at Arthur Vance. "Sir, for the record, I filed my official whistleblower report with the state this morning as an employee of this company." I paused, then let my eyes drift to Maura for the first time, a final data point for her to process. And, as the child who once waited for CPS to come back, the statement landed. It reframed everything. The motive was no longer just corporate justice. It was the conclusion of a case file that had been unofficially open for 12 years. It explained the patience, the meticulousness, the refusal to break. It was the reason the data was so clean. Maura flinched, as if the words themselves were a physical blow. Her carefully constructed world of corporate power, of stages and spotlights, collapsed into a single, stark reality. She was no longer a director, a leader, a visionary. She was just a name on a business license and a ghost in a government file. She turned, her movements stiff and robotic, and looked toward the vast wall of glass that formed the back of the room. It was meant to offer a stunning view of the city, a symbol of corporate transparency and vision. But at this moment, with the bright overhead lights of the conference room and the dimmer light of the world outside, it had become a mirror. Her reflection stared back at her. A woman, pale and suddenly small, stripped of her title and her audience. There was no flattering stage lighting now, only the cold, white, clinical glare of the room. It was not the light of a theater. It was the light of a laboratory, a place where illusions were dissected and truths were laid bare upon a slab. The arrival of the forensic investigation team from Deloitte was a quiet, efficient invasion. They moved with a purpose that replaced the room's high drama with the cold, sterile atmosphere of a crime scene. Maura was gone, escorted out a side door, but her presence lingered like a ghost in the system they were now here to exercise. The board members remained, silent observers at their long table, their meeting having been irrevocably transformed into a damage control session. Arthur Vance and the lead investigator, a man with tired eyes and an impeccably sharp suit, approached me. "Ms. Calloway," the investigator began, his voice neutral, "we'll need to take possession of the drive and any supporting materials you have." "Of course," I said, but I didn't hand over the drive just yet. "There is one other piece of documentation. It's not financial. It's foundational. It establishes a baseline for the subject's long-term methodology regarding narrative control." From my briefcase, I produced a single, crisp sheet of paper. It was a high-quality photocopy of a document 12 years old, a report from the West Delmont Department of Child Protective Services. I handed it to the investigator. His eyes scanned the bureaucratic text, the checked boxes, the thin, dispassionate summary of Mrs. Gable's visit. He slowed at the final sentence of the summary. "No clear signs of visible distress observed in the minor," he read aloud, his voice flat. "That sentence is the most important piece of data," I stated, my voice equally devoid of emotion. "I am not providing this to elicit sympathy. I am providing it as the earliest documented instance of Director Vale's core skill, successfully fabricating a controlled environment to deceive an official audit. The method she used to defraud this company is the exact same method she perfected in my childhood home. This isn't a personal matter. It's a professional pattern." The investigator looked from the paper to my face, and for the first time, a flicker of understanding warmed his tired eyes. He placed the document into a clear evidence sleeve. "It will be included in the file," he said. "There is also a corroborating witness to that early environment," I added, glancing toward the back of the room where Sarah Jenkins was being discreetly spoken to by a woman from HR. "Ms. Jenkins can attest to a pattern of behavior she observed from the subject during hours that, by company definition, would have been designated for dependent care. Her testimony will confirm hearing incidents of extreme verbal pressure, the sound of objects being thrown, and a general atmosphere of coercive control, all of which are relevant to establishing a baseline for the subject's historical management style." Just then, a vibration in my pocket, a buzz against my leg. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed with a name I had not seen in months. Grant Calloway. My father. The investigator noticed my hesitation. "You should take that," he said. I stepped away, my back to the room, and answered. The line was silent for a moment. Then his voice came, thick with confusion and a desperate, misplaced loyalty. "Reese, what's going on? I'm getting calls. Security. They're saying things about Maura, her career. Reese, what are you doing to your mother?" The word mother was a miscalculation, a piece of faulty data. I looked at the reflection of the room in the dark glass of my phone's screen, a world being systematically dismantled and rebuilt on a foundation of fact. "I'm fixing a process," she wrote, I said, and ended the call. I turned back to the investigator and Mr. Vance, who had overheard. My face was a mask of professional calm. "My father," I said, by way of explanation. "He has been operating under the subject's narrative for a very long time." I held up my phone. "It's why I learned to keep my own logs." Vance's eyes sharpened. "You have more?" "One final file," I said. "An audio log, from the day of the CPS visit." The investigator held out his hand. "I'll need to hear it." I didn't play it for the room. I held the phone between the two men, cupping my hand around it to create a small, private space of sound. I pressed play. The audio was low fidelity, filled with the hiss of an old device. You could hear the faint sound of my own 16-year-old breathing, a little too shallow. And then, Maura's voice. It was not the warm, resonant voice that had filled the conference room an hour ago. This was a whisper. A blade of ice slid directly into the ear. "We're a team, Reese. Unless you make me look bad, don't ever make me look bad." The clip was 6 seconds long. 6 seconds that contained the entire operating manual for Maura Vale. The threat was not in the volume, but in the absolute cold clarity of the contract it laid out. Teamwork was conditional. Loyalty was a shield for her reputation. My value was directly proportional to my ability to maintain her public image. The investigator's expression hardened into granite. Vance closed his eyes for a brief second. The reporter, who had been watching this quiet exchange with the predatory stillness of a hawk, took a step forward. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice respectful but firm. "What was that?" Vance opened his eyes. He looked at the reporter, then at me. He made a decision. He nodded to the AV technician. "Let the record be complete," he commanded. Patch the analyst's phone into the room's audio system. The technician, wide-eyed, quickly brought over a cable. I connected it. A moment later, he gave me a thumbs up. I pressed play again. This time, the sound was clean, amplified, stripped of its background hiss by the high-end system. The 6-second whisper filled the vast, silent conference room. It echoed off the glass walls. It settled into the stunned silence of the board members. It was a ghost from a small, peeling house in Coldridge, now speaking with perfect, chilling diction to the entire executive leadership of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It was the Rosetta Stone, the key that unlocked everything. I did not cry. I felt a strange, cold calm settle into my bones. The fight was over. The data had been presented. The process was complete. I disconnected my phone and turned to the lead investigator. He held out a clipboard with a chain of custody form. I took the pen. I signed my name on the line, officially relinquishing the team's real drive into his possession. My hand did not shake. In some quiet, unvisited corner of my memory, the 16-year-old girl who once wrote in dust and counted footsteps on the floor finally stopped waiting. The knock on the door she had always been listening for had finally come. It had been her own. The 6-second whisper faded, but the silence it left behind was a ringing in the ears. It was a vacuum, heavy and absolute. Into this void. Arthur Vance's voice struck like a gavel. He did not speak to the room. He turned and spoke directly into the lens of the live stream camera, his face a mask of cold fury. His words were not a deliberation. They were a verdict delivered to the entire company. "Let the official record show," he began, his voice a low, powerful instrument of command, "that effective immediately, as of this moment, Maura Vale is suspended from all duties at Greyline and Cole. All access is revoked. The complete and unredacted file of this morning's presentation, including all evidence presented by analyst Reese Calloway, will be turned over to the Office of the State Attorney General for criminal prosecution." He paused, letting the weight of the word criminal settle. "This live stream is now an official corporate record. The team culture event is concluded." The red light on the camera did not go off. The reporter, sensing the magnitude of the moment, kept filming. This was no longer a corporate meeting. It was a public execution. While Vance was speaking, I turned to the small, networked printer at the AV station. I sent a single file to print. The machine whirred to life, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. It produced a single sheet of paper. I walked from the back of the room, my footsteps echoing, and did not stop until I reached the long, polished table where the board sat. I did not look at Maura, who stood paralyzed between the stage and the exit, a ghost in her own life. I placed the paper on the table directly in front of Arthur Vance's empty chair. It was the email I had sent to Maura, the one confirming the run of show, and her enthusiastic signed-off reply. Next to it, I placed the agenda for the afternoon's board meeting. I used my finger to highlight one item. Agenda Item 4B, Review and Approval of Everline Services, Master Service Agreement, 3-year term. "She was going to sign the renewal this afternoon," I said, my voice just loud enough for the table to hear. After her speech on teamwork, I pushed the papers an inch forward. It was not an accusation. It was a final procedural flourish. A bill of divorce, citing irreconcilable truths. The 2 security men were moving now, their presence large and apologetic. They flanked Maura, not touching her, but creating an inexorable path toward the exit. It was time for her to leave the stage. She took a step, then another. The camera from the live stream swung to follow her, a silent, mechanical predator tracking its prey. Her head was up, a last vestige of defiant pride, but her eyes were searching, scanning the faces of the vice presidents and senior managers she had mentored, promoted, and terrorized. She was looking for an ally, a nod of support, a single glance that said, "This is a mistake." She found nothing. Eyes dropped to notepads. Faces turned to study the carpet with intense interest. Colleagues who had laughed at her jokes an hour ago now looked through her as if she were made of glass. In a room of 100 people, she was utterly, completely alone. The microphone on the lectern was still live. I stepped onto the stage, the soft lights feeling suddenly harsh. I did not address the board or the executives. I spoke to the camera. I spoke to the analysts in their cubicles, the warehouse workers on their break, the drivers listening in their cabs 1,000 miles away. "We're a team," I said, and the words felt clean for the first time. But a team is only a team when it protects its most vulnerable members, not when it conspires to protect its most powerful. A team is built on verifiable data, not on a convenient narrative. Today, that narrative has been corrected. And then, a small sound, a rip. A young analyst in the third row, a woman I barely knew, reached forward and deliberately peeled the glossy "Team First" sticker from the lid of her laptop. She looked at it for a moment, then dropped it onto the floor. A moment later, another employee did the same, then another, and another. It was a quiet, spreading wave of dissent, a silent mutiny against a philosophy of fear. The head of HR, a woman who had seen Sarah Jenkins weeping quietly in the back of the room, stood up and walked to the front, holding open an empty cardboard box. The message was clear: policy recall. One by one, employees filed past, dropping the small, colorful squares of propaganda into the box. The sound was a soft, percussive rain, the peeling of adhesive, the soft thud of laminated paper. It was the sound of a spell breaking. Maura was at the doors now, the security guards holding them open. She did not look back. The doors closed behind her, and she was in the lobby, the bright, impersonal space that led to the elevators. The reporter from Logistics Ledger, moving with surprising speed, was already there, his phone's camera raised. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, final ding. Maura turned, perhaps for a last look at the company she had conquered and lost. Instead, she came face to face with the lens. A flash of pure, animal panic crossed her features. Her hand flew up to shield her face, a reflexive gesture of concealment. But the camera caught it all: the manicured nails, the expensive rings, and, glinting under the lobby's unforgiving fluorescent lights, the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist, a custom piece she wore every day. Engraved in a fine, elegant script was a single word: "Captain." The elevator doors closed, encasing her in a box of mirrored steel. Back in the conference room, the silent ceremony of the stickers was ending. The box was nearly full. I turned back to the AV console. The live stream was still running, broadcasting the quiet, solemn aftermath to the entire company. I moved the mouse. The cursor hovered over the End Presentation button. With a final, deliberate click, the screen behind the stage went blank. Not black, white. A vast, empty, brilliant field of white. No data, no logos, no smiling faces, no slogans. The complete and total absence of a narrative. A clean slate. The room was still. The work was over. The only sound was the faint hum of the electronics. And in that profound quiet, I could hear it. A sound from a different room, a different lifetime. The specific, rhythmic creak of wooden floorboards under a measured, angry weight. A sound that had always been a countdown. A warning. I stood perfectly still, listening to the memory. I waited. And for the first time in 12 years, the sound was just a sound. The countdown reached 0, and nothing happened. The floorboards were silent. The threat was gone. The conference room began to breathe again, not with relief, but with the quiet, purposeful hum of process. The Deloitte investigators worked with a detached efficiency, connecting their own secure laptops to the network, their movements economical and precise. They were the system's antibodies, arriving to purge the infection. Arthur Vance stood with me by the long table, the now empty stage behind us feeling like an artifact from another era. The lead investigator approached, holding out a digital tablet and the clear evidence bag containing the team's real drive. "Ms. Calloway, we just need your signature on the chain of custody form. It acknowledges you are turning this evidence over to us, and it formally activates your protections under the state's whistleblower statutes." I took the stylus. The screen was a simple form with fields for date, time, and signature. It was the last piece of paperwork, the final entry in a log I had been keeping for 12 years. I signed my name. The digital ink was a clean, dark line on the bright screen. I handed the tablet back. He sealed the drive into a lockable hard case. The click of the latches was a sound of profound finality. The burden of proof was no longer mine to carry. "Reese," Arthur Vance said, his voice softer now that the public performance was over. He gestured to the board members, who were watching me with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "The board is in unanimous agreement. In light of your exceptional analytical skills and demonstrated commitment to the company's integrity, we would like to offer you the position of Interim Director of Regional Operations, effective immediately." The offer hung in the air. It was the spoils of war, the victor's prize, the logical conclusion to a corporate coup. It was everything I was supposed to want. I looked at the faces of the board members. They were offering me Maura's chair, her title, her power. They were offering to replace one system operator with another. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," I said, my voice even. I respectfully declined the offer. A flicker of surprise, a shadow of confusion, crossed his face. "Decline? This is a significant opportunity." "My actions today were not part of a career advancement strategy," I explained, choosing my words with the care of a programmer writing critical code. "They were a necessary system correction. The data shows that the culture of my division was compromised. Placing me in charge, as the agent of that correction, would send the wrong message. It would personalize a procedural failure." I let the words settle, then provided the solution. "What the division needs is not a new director. It needs a new operating system. I will not accept any promotion or change in status until this board has authorized the creation of a new, fully independent Ethics and Compliance Oversight Committee, with a direct and non-negotiable reporting line to the board itself, not to the executive leadership. When that committee is in place, and its charter is made public to every employee, then I will be happy to discuss my future role at this company." Vance stared at me, his analytical mind processing this unexpected turn. He was a man who understood power, and he had just witnessed a person who had accumulated a massive amount of it give it away in exchange for a principle. He slowly nodded. "Your recommendation is noted, Ms. Calloway, and it will be implemented." I returned to my desk, not Maura's grand office, but my small gray cubicle. The cheerful, mocking poster was already gone, taken down by an HR representative as if it were a biohazard. I logged into my computer. There was one last task to perform. I composed a new email. The recipient was the company-wide distribution list. The subject line was simple: an update to corporate policy. The body of the email contained 3 lines. "To all Gray Line & Cole employees. This message is to inform you of an update to the company's whistleblower and corporate ethics policies. All employees are encouraged to review the new guidelines and reporting procedures at their earliest convenience. Thank you." There was no talk of teamwork, no soaring rhetoric about new beginnings. It was a patch notification, a firmware update for a flawed system. I attached one link, a direct portal to the newly drafted, radically transparent, and fiercely protective whistleblower policy that my lawyer had helped me design. I hit send. Then I logged out, powered down my machine, and collected my few personal belongings from my desk: a spare pen, a small notebook, a framed photo of a stretch of empty highway in West Delmont. I walked out of the Harbor Point Depot for the last time. The building felt different, lighter. I didn't go home. I drove to Graybridge Plaza, the glass tower at the heart of the city. I left my box of belongings in the car and walked to the front of the building. I just stood there on the sidewalk, looking up. The sun was directly overhead, a brilliant, cleansing glare in a cloudless sky. It struck the hundreds of mirrored windows, turning the entire skyscraper into a wall of blinding white light. It looked like a fresh start, a blank page, an empty spreadsheet, waiting for clean data. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a notification appeared. Voicemail received. I played it. The voice was tinny, bureaucratic. "This is a message for Reese Calloway from the West Delmont CPS office. We are calling to confirm that, per your request, we have received and appended your adult addendum to the historical case file 7/15/2013. The file has been updated. Thank you." I deleted the message. Then I opened the secure folder on my phone where I kept a single, scanned image, my photocopy of the original CPS report. I looked at it for a long moment, the typed, inadequate words that had failed to see the truth. Then I pressed delete. The file vanished. I no longer needed to be its keeper. The record was now official, and it was no longer mine to hold. There were no victory speeches. There were no triumphant embraces. No one was waiting to congratulate me. There was only me, on a sun-drenched sidewalk, surrounded by the anonymous rush of the city. I stood up a little straighter, my shoulders feeling lighter than they had in years. I took a deep, clean breath. The air tasted like nothing at all. It tasted normal. My fingers went to the plastic badge clipped to my belt. It was my old one, from my previous role before Maura had promoted me. It read, "Reese Calloway, Team Lead." It felt heavy, an artifact from a system whose rules I would no longer play by. I unclipped it. A few feet away was a heavy, cylindrical metal bin, designated for recyclables. I held the badge for a second. Then, with a simple, final flick of my wrist, I tossed it in. It made a small, unsatisfying clatter as it hit the bottom, the sound immediately swallowed by the noise of the city. It was over. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where in the world are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. And if you'd like to give it an extra boost, please hit the hype button to help this story be heard by even more people.